In the golden age of professional wrestling, where men were giants and kayfabe was a religion, there stood one mountainous man that could stop traffic and a glare that could curdle milk. Big John Studd. If the wrestling world were a dodgy pub, Studd was the bloke sitting in the corner who looked like he'd headbutt a jukebox for playing Wham! At 6'10" and weighing in at over 350 pounds, Big John wasn't just a wrestler, he was a grumpy skyscraper with boots. But for all the muscles and man-mountain mystique, Studd was as famous for the men he didn't get on with as he was for the ones he clotheslined into orbit. You see, Big John didn't suffer fools gladly. He didn't even suffer mildly irritating people without threatening to drop them on their heads. His list of backstage beefs reads like a who's who of blokes who probably needed a good hiding. Some were legitimate heat-filled grudges, others were born of bruised egos, stiff matches, and oversized men trying to out-alpha each other like the WWF was a prison yard. It wasn't all about titles and slams, it was about pride, pettiness, and proving who was the biggest bastard in the locker room. And Big John Studd, God rest his slightly terrifying soul, didn't play second fiddle to anyone. Well, almost anyone. This is the story of the 5 wrestlers Big John Studd couldn't bloody stand. Not in a passive-aggressive Christmas card way. No. In a he'd legit strangle you if Gorilla Monsoon wasn't watching way. We're diving into the real-life heat, the legendary stiff matches, and the egos so bloated they had their own gravitational pull. And just to make this more entertaining than a Ric Flair bar tab, if you're a sensitive soul or a Hulk Hogan apologist, this might sting a little. But for the rest of us with a love of wrestling history and a fondness for verbal body slams, welcome to the maddening world of Big John Studd's most hated coworkers. Get ready, because this ain't a shoot interview. It's a verbal suplex laced with facts, fury, and more than a few stiff right hands to the ribs of wrestling lore. Let's start with the obvious one. Andre the Bloody Giant. The legend, the myth, the man who could drink an entire brewery dry and still walk to the ring without a wobble. If Big John Studd was the King Kong of WWE, then Andre was Godzilla, and their mutual hatred was less a rivalry and more an ongoing attempt to prove who had the biggest swinging ego. Andre didn't just dislike Studd, he loathed him like a vegan loathes a bacon sandwich. And it wasn't just about wrestling billing, though. Andre took massive offense to Studd calling himself the true giant of the WWF. According to multiple sources, including Jake the Snake Roberts, Andre used to beat the crap out of Studd just because he could. Not metaphorically, literally. John was a good guy, man, and Andre hated him, so he would beat the fuck out of him, Jake once said, laughing and probably cringing at the same time. Andre thought Studd was stiff in the ring, so to retaliate, he responded the way only a 500-pound angry Frenchman could, by clubbing Studd like he owed him money. Their infamous body slam challenge at WrestleMania? I was the climax of years of animosity, both scripted and real. Studd lost, got body slammed, and Andre threw the $15,000 prize money into the crowd like he was feeding pigeons. Vince McMahon might have booked it, but Andre loved humiliating Studd. To Studd's credit, he kept coming back for more. Either the man had the heart of a lion or the brain of a wardrobe. But even as he returned to the WWF in 1989 as a face, the feud never cooled. Andre still wouldn't shake his hand. And that, my friends, is the wrestling equivalent of getting ghosted by your own tag team partner. Big John Studd and King Kong Bundy were 2 of the WWF's most recognizable monsters of the mid-1980s. A pair of behemoths who looked like they were spawned in a steel mill and fed nothing but steak, squats, and sardonic promos. On screen, they were often allies, most notably in the Heenan family, where Bobby the Brain tried to keep his pair of grizzlies on the same leash. But off-screen? Studd allegedly couldn't stomach Bundy. He saw the bald bruiser as a cut-rate version of himself. Sources like Bruce Pritchard and Jim Cornette have hinted that the tension between the two wasn't explosive, but it simmered just under the surface. Studd felt Bundy was too eager to climb the ladder by piggybacking on his reputation. The two often teamed up, but Studd didn't appreciate sharing the monster spotlight with someone he considered beneath him in both size and in-ring psychology. Their styles also clashed like 2 bulls in a butcher shop. Studd preferred slow, deliberate brawling, a methodical pace that made his size look even more intimidating. Bundy, on the other hand, favored short bursts of offense and high-impact moves that popped the crowd, but sometimes made the match look rushed or sloppy. Studd was not a fan of getting shown up, even accidentally. And Bundy? He was more than happy to talk about how many seconds it took him to squash an opponent while Studd stood in the background. One infamous house show incident in 1986 reportedly saw Stud blow up backstage after Bundy ignored a pre-agreed spot, resulting in Stud nearly walking out of the building. While they remained tag partners on TV, many insiders believe their alliance was held together by Heenan's diplomatic skills and Vince McMahon's obsession with booking visual spectacle. Ultimately, Stud viewed Bundy as a loud, spotlight-hogging pest who didn't pay proper dues. Bundy, in turn, seemed indifferent to the quiet contempt, likely figuring that if he was getting booked on the same cards, he was doing something right. Their feud never made it to TV, but behind the scenes, it was as real as a Bundy splash to the chest, and twice as awkward. Camala, the Ugandan giant, had a gimmick so absurd it practically jumped off the TV screen and slapped you in the face. But while the crowd loved him, Big John Studd was not a fan. Camala, with his moon-shaped face and grunting performances, wasn't exactly the kind of wrestler you'd expect to have beef with a guy who looked like he could bend steel with his bare hands. But, according to insiders, Studd saw Camala as a lazy worker. Camala had a pretty limited moveset, a few chops, a splash, and his signature Ugandan stomps. But beyond that, his in-ring work was nothing to write home about. The biggest heat came from Kamala's tendency to blow spots and take his time getting to the next move. Studd, who valued smooth, methodical pacing, reportedly couldn't stand the fact that Kamala's matches felt more like a slow-motion train wreck than a high-impact affair. In one famous encounter, the two were booked in a series of tag matches where Kamala's role was supposed to be that of a straight-up monster. But when it came time to work together, Camala would sometimes freeze in the middle of a match, clearly forgetting the spots. For Studd, this was unforgivable. He saw it as a sign of disrespect, like someone showing up to a steak dinner with a hot dog and ketchup. Backstage, Studd would mutter under his breath about Kamala's lack of ring awareness and how it made him look like he was wrestling a bag of potatoes. While Camala had his fans, to Studd, the Ugandan giant wasn't much more than an embarrassing spectacle who didn't deserve to be in the same ring as him. For Studd, it was like playing chess with someone who only knew checkers. Brutus Beefcake was known for his eccentric gimmick, always ready with a pair of scissors to cut off someone's hair in the name of justice or boredom, depending on how you saw it. But for Big John Studd, Beefcake was a little too much, too colorful, too flashy, and too damn obsessed with giving people makeovers. For Studd, a man who was the definition of old-school professionalism, Beefcake's antics were more irritating than amusing. While Beefcake was busy wearing glittery robes and cutting off hair with a cheesy grin, Studd was more concerned with coming across as a legitimate threat. Beefcake's gimmick was all show and no substance, a stark contrast to Studd's no-nonsense approach to wrestling. It's been said that Studd had little patience for workers who relied on props and gimmicks, especially when they overshadowed the actual in-ring ability. Beefcake's over-the-top persona might have worked for some, but to Studd, it was an affront to the business. If you wanted to make it in wrestling, you didn't get by on cheap tricks. You did it by putting in the work and making your opponent believe you could rip their arms off if you felt like it. While Studd focused on the basics, Beefcake's tendency to ham it up for the crowd only served to irritate him. According to sources close to the situation, Studd would often complain about Beefcake's clownish behavior, saying it made his matches look like a circus act. Beefcake might have been a fan favorite, but to Studd, he was little more than a sideshow attraction. Hillbilly Jim might have been beloved by fans, but Big John Studd was never one to join in the love affair. Jim's goofy, redneck gimmick, while charming to some, rubbed Studd the wrong way. He viewed Jim's persona as too much, and beneath what wrestling should represent. According to several reports from people who worked with them, Studd saw Jim as a sideshow character who was never taken seriously, much to his own disdain. Jim's penchant for pandering to the audience and his lighthearted antics seemed like a huge contrast to Studd's serious, no-nonsense attitude. While Jim was happy to play the fool and entertain, Studd thought the antics only cheapened the business. Jim's antics in the ring were seen as another reason why Studd couldn't be bothered with him. Unlike Jim, Studd didn't want to be known for anything other than his brutal in-ring work and intimidating presence. To Studd, Jim's goofy persona was a slap in the face to those who put in the hard work to make wrestling seem like a real competition. This attitude didn't exactly make for warm backstage relationships, but it sure as hell made for some memorable TV moments. Big John Studd wasn't just a giant in stature, he was a colossal presence in a business full of outsized egos, suspect booking decisions, and more backstabbing than an episode of Game of Thrones. For all his size and stoicism, Studd was a man of fierce convictions and a long memory. He wasn't the type to throw a tantrum or go off script with a live mic. He just quietly added your name to a list written in metaphorical cement and carried on, occasionally dropping you on your head a little harder than necessary. Throughout his career, Stud clashed with other wrestlers, not because he was a locker room cancer or a raging egomaniac, but because he took the business seriously, possibly too seriously. In an era where cartoonish characters and neon gimmicks ruled, Stud represented a throwback, a towering hoss who believed wrestling should look real, feel real, and absolutely not involve a man pretending to be a Ugandan headhunter or a mullet-draped barber with hedge clippers. His heat with Andre was the stuff of legend, a real-life clash of the titans where bruises weren't always part of the show. With King Kong Bundy, it was less biblical and more like two unmovable objects in a pissing contest over who was the better wrecking ball. Camala offended Stud's sense of logic and respect for the craft. Beefcake grated on him like a promo from The Ultimate Warrior in Hillbilly Jim. Well, Stud probably felt like someone was mocking the industry every time Jim licked his thumb and started clog dancing. In the end, Big John Stud's grudges helped shape the way we remember the golden era. He gave fans memorable rivalries and gave some of his co-workers lifelong chiropractic bills. And while he may have never won a popularity contest backstage, he damn sure earned the respect of fans who wanted their giants to act like giants, not jungle dancers, flamboyant barbers, or down-home yokels with questionable dental care. God bless you, Stud, you enormous, surly bastard. Thanks for watching.